Hello, friends. Welcome to Led to Gold. This is the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. So happy that you're here and very excited to get into this conversation with you today. But before I do, I'm going to just give us the usual podcast spiel that you always are going to get. I want you to know, first and foremost, that this is not your standard wellness podcast. I fully believe that the only true definition of wellness is what works for each individual person. And I know that that is a very nuanced conversation. So this is always going to be a place where we don't deal with the BS. We're going to talk about the BS and we're going to talk about why it's BS. But ultimately, I'm just interested in getting very real about the conversations that surround internet wellness discourse and just what that actually means. You know, not trying to grift, just trying to have some genuine conversations about it. So if that sounds like something that could be useful to you, I welcome you in. I'm so happy you're here. And I want you to know too that Led to Gold is not just a podcast, it's also a blog. So if you like what we talk about here, you would probably also like my blog posts as well. They get a little bit more introspective, but you know, people are on Substack these days. I'm not currently really active on Substack, but I do have my website down below in the show notes. It is ledtogold.blog. Super easy. I would love to see you over there as well. And if you really just want to stay up to date with what's going on in the Led to Gold space, I also send out a monthly newsletter. And I absolutely love putting this together. It just honestly kind of feels like a little diary entry from me to you. And you're going to get the first looks at everything that's coming out. I also like to do a little media roundup just of the things that I've been reading and watching and kind of like paying attention to. Those are really fun. There's some cute like collages in there. And my favorite personal piece of this newsletter is that I always send it out right around the beginning of the new astrological season. So with that, I always make a custom playlist that kind of gives that vibe of the new season. So if you're interested, this is a playlist that you can extract and use pretty much on any streaming platform that you use. There will be a link for that there as well. So if you're interested, sign up for the newsletters. They are truly only once a month. I don't like to spam you guys, so I won't. And last but not least, if you really do want to support the show and see it grow as much as I do, because I really do, the best ways to do that at this point in time are really just to rate the podcast wherever you're listening to it and to share it with a friend, especially if you think they would like the conversation that we have today. That's really all I got for now. So thank you so much. If you do any of that, if you do none of that, again, just glad you're here. And I'm doing something that I haven't really done in a while to start off with this episode today. Normally, I write out a whole bunch of notes for the thing that we're going to be discussing, but in all honesty, I kind of just wanted to see what it would be like to just riff about this a little bit. And I'm very conflicted, honestly, with the conversation that we're going to be having today. I feel a lot of different ways about it, but ultimately this came from a place where I have been seeing more discourse around the quote unquote jealous friend and why it is or isn't okay or toxic to be jealous of your loved ones or just jealous in general. And I know that this can be kind of a weird, like niche topic, like not something that comes up in wellness spaces all that often, but as the internet tends to do, this has become a talking point on TikTok mainly. And I'm not even on TikTok, so I don't really know how this found its way to me, but I do find it to be such an interesting conversation, especially personally, because it is something that I've been struggling with lately. So I wanted to bring it here and have a more open dialogue about it. As always, I mean, any episode that I put out on this podcast, I want to hear from you and I want to know your thoughts on the subjects that we talk about here. especially this one though, because it is truly something that I'm like, I don't really know how I feel about this. I've always been conflicted about it, even within my own experience. So I'm going to break down my personal experience and then talk about how this larger conversation that's been kind of sparking online lately, I think shows us a sort of misguided interpretation of what the point of jealousy is, and how, I mean, maybe spoiler alert right here off the bat, I don't think it's a bad thing to feel the emotion of jealousy, as a lot of people are already saying online. You know, it's a normal human emotion. But we're going to talk about why some people think that that's not really the case, or why it's not that simple. And we're also going to discuss, I think, what the conversation at large is missing, which is how you can use that emotion to garner something new in your life, to use it to your advantage. And I don't even mean that in a way of like optimizing your jealousy, like not what I'm getting at here. But, you know, let's just get into it. Let's open up the conversation a little bit. I want to start with me, just because I think that this is where a lot of the conversations that I have on Led to Gold stem from. Like, it's something that I'm either thinking a lot about or actively experiencing. And this is something, as I've already said a couple of times, that I've been conflicted with within myself for most of my life. And I will start it as simply as saying, when I was younger, I can think of times where I was upset that somebody got something that I wanted. There's a level of competition to that. And I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head, but I definitely just remember the experience of jealousy in the form of, okay, that friend or that person has this thing that I want and I wish I had it instead of them. Not necessarily that like I want to take it from them, but more so, why did they deserve that? Because I think I deserved that more. One specific example, even all the way up to today, is I genuinely read so many books that piss me off, to be quite frank, because the writing is so bad. And I read it and I'm like, I don't understand how this person got published. I could so easily do this. Like, I could do such a better job at this. Or similar, where I'll go to really, you know, nice home goods stores. Like, there's a lot in the downtown area where I live that are just very like nicely curated. Things are pretty expensive and they have a lot of like art pieces. And even that I'll look at and be like, why would I spend $80 on this literal like 2 by 2 inches painting that somebody did when I could make that? I could do that. That's very honestly where it stems from in me. That's the conversation that I have with myself, just like very candidly. And I already, as I'm saying this, I'm already starting to fear the potential backlash to saying something like that, because the place where this whole internet discourse appeared was by a creator. I don't remember her TikTok handle right now, but I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it. Her name's Farah, and she's probably a few years younger than me. She had this conversation about how she feels jealous of her friend who she felt like had a lot more privilege than she did growing up. So that friend was able to get a lot more out of their life and a lot more far along and advanced in like their careers and their relationships than she was. And it was a very honest conversation where she's like, yeah, like I hate that I experienced this, but I really am jealous of my friend's experience with life and how much they've been able to do. And I'm just not very happy with where I'm at. And people tore her to shreds. So my point in saying this is that, okay, I know that I'm not going to get as many listens on this episode as Farah got on her TikTok video, but I already know that people will hear that truth that I just shared with you and hate me or think that I'm like a terrible person for feeling that way, which this is the part of this conversation that's really interesting to me, because yeah, I don't love that I feel that way. I don't love that that is an emotion I've carried throughout my life, where I see something that somebody else has done and I just am like I could do that. I could do that better. And yeah, I don't know. To me, it's always felt nasty. Like, oh, I wish I could just be happy for that person. But instead I'm like, well, why can't I just do that? Like, I should be able to do that. And it's, to some people, as I have found out through this conversation online, through this larger talking point, that some people really, really think that that is evil. It is evil to feel that way. It is evil to be jealous of anybody else, but especially people that you're close to. I want to very quickly explain the key arguments being made in this TikTok debate, if you will. And don't want to spend a lot of time here because it's really not the point of the episode to just kind of go back and forth between these thoughts. But just for context, a lot of people agree with Farah where, hey, yeah, I've experienced jealousy too. Jealousy is a normal human emotion. We all experience it. It's normal so long as you're not being vindictive or terrible toward that person. And I think even the people, like the strongest supporters of her argument, would say that, yeah, you can be jealous, but don't be hateful, which we'll definitely get into a little bit later. But then the other side of that argument is, I would say, pretty fiercely negative, pretty fiercely like, oh, I've never felt that way. I don't experience jealousy. I'm just happy for the people that get the things that I want. One maybe slightly more compelling argument that I've seen is people saying, well, just seeing somebody get the thing that I might want is an opportunity for me to be like, wow, now I know that this is possible for me. I find that one to be more of an interesting take, at least, than the people who are just outright saying that they've never felt jealousy before, or that it's just not really a natural human emotion, because, I mean, I think that's just objectively wrong. If some people experience it, then it's a thing that is capable of being experienced. Some people, maybe a mildly more nuanced take, would say that just because something is common doesn't make it normal. And okay, maybe we could explore that a little bit. I would definitely agree that it is common to feel jealousy, but maybe there is something to be said for the fact that we shouldn't normalize it, or we shouldn't praise it in any way. That's the general gist of how people have been discussing it, but further than that, I think what I've ultimately seen is a lot of pointing fingers at one side or the other, being like, well, you're not being honest. You're just not being honest if you feel that way about jealousy, or if you say that you've never felt it. And then fingers pointing back at the other side being like, well, you're just a bad friend, or you clearly have the worst intentions in being friends with people or being a supporter of other people, or you're not being a real feminist, or whatever the judgment might be. But what I think this general debate does is flatten the argument altogether. This is not a super objectively important argument to be having in the grand scheme of things right now. But again, I think it's just interesting to pay attention to and see how, in all honesty, it's like a larger case study of the internet and internet discourse culture kind of just flattening a lot of what could be really interesting conversations. And just to say, I think that having jealousy or experiencing jealousy is not a reflection on anybody's character. It doesn't make you toxic. It just gives you information. And yes, I'm sure there are a few people out there saying that around this larger discussion in the original video, but that is the conversation that then takes us a little bit deeper into, okay, great. So like, what do we do with that information, right? Because now we've gone beyond just saying it's a toxic trait, you need to do the work, use it to inspire you, blah, 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 or just letting it be. You know, now we kind of have a direction to take it in. Whether or not this is something that you actively experience or relate to, I think the probably morally correct way to go about your jealousy is that you want to think more about what do you do with it. So clearly, it's not an immediate problem to experience the emotion of jealousy. That is kind of not something that we can control entirely, although, not to get back into the internet discourse, but I have seen the argument that some of these people are just emotionally regulated and kind of weaponizing what that means to say that they're in full 100% control of their emotions and minds and thoughts 100% of the time, which I'm just here to say is practically impossible. I don't think that anyone is emotionally regulated 100% of the time, because that's not how our biology works. But anyway, I do think that having this lens on it, as far as the emotion is one thing, it's the reaction to those emotions that matter. And that separates, I think, the definitions of jealousy and envy, which a lot of people use interchangeably, but they actually mean very different things. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But just before I get there, I want to say, again, the feeling of it is not really the problem. It's what you potentially end up doing after feeling it. So I'll go back to my example a minute ago of seeing expensive, like ridiculously overpriced art in these little home goods stores that I go into. And this isn't to brag on myself, but I literally, every single time I did it, thought to myself, like, I could make that. This thing probably took this artist, I don't know how long. It doesn't really matter how long it took them, but the fact that they can sell it now for hundreds of dollars is like kind of motivating. And especially thinking like, yeah, I could do that. I went home and I fine-tuned my painting skills a little bit and I got better at it. I started making my own art. I started hanging my own art up around our house. So now, yay, I've solved the problem of not having to pay an arm and a leg for wall art. But also, I was able to then turn around and sell some of my own art at a local vintage shop. Like, I did do the thing that I was jealous of. I saw that other people were doing it, so I did it. And I would like to think that it was pretty successful. You know, it was a net positive in terms of the money that I had to invest in doing all of that, but then I ended up making more money than I spent, and yeah, net positive. It was a great experience. So that just goes to show, I think, what a lot of the dissenters of jealousy are trying to say, which is that if you are jealous of what somebody has, then you just need to like go and do it yourself, which, okay, in my case, that did work. But I think in a lot of cases, that is a very, very simplistic take. And we've talked about that here in different ways before. It really ignores, I think, the financial standing of a lot of people, of the amount of time that people are able to spend on their hobbies or their goals or their desires. And it's really just not that simple for a lot of folks. So I was lucky. I do hope that most people, when they experience a jealous emotion toward something that somebody else has, I do hope that that inspires them to take action and do something to get themselves there. But I know that in practice, it just doesn't always happen that way. It's just, maybe it's not feasible. Maybe it's going to take years. Maybe it's just not something that is attainable for that person. And that is the truth that a lot of people choose to ignore. This even gets us deeper into some of the nuance around the words that people choose to use to talk about this larger conversation. And this is where my English teacher comes in, because there is a very distinct difference between jealousy and envy, and not everybody knows that there even is a difference between them. So I do think it's important to distinguish that definition and then talk about how different situations can lead to different things, or there's at least an easier path to maybe nefarious behavior when it comes to certain things that people are jealous or envious of. Let me just start with the definition. Jealousy, which is the larger term being used to have this discussion, is I think for the most part what people mean when they say it. Jealousy is when somebody has something that you want and you want it for yourself. Like, that is as simple as it gets. It is, that person has something that I want it. I also want it. Whereas envy is more like, that person has something that I want and I don't want them to have it. I want to have it, but I don't want them to have it. They don't deserve it. They shouldn't have gotten it. That's where the conversation can get a little bit, like I said, more nefarious. But a lot of the dissension around jealousy in general, I think people are starting to kind of confuse it with envy, which is different. Realistically, these two emotions can show up differently, and there's certain situations in which it is more natural for people to become envious. And I'm going to break all of this down, but I'll paint us a picture again, just with the art example. I was jealous that these artists were able to sell their art and make so much money, or I don't really know how much money they made, but it seemed like a lot. So jealousy meant, I want that. I want to have that for myself. I want to be able to do that. And I did. Whereas envy would cause me to go, I don't know who the fuck these artists think they are, but they're not really creating anything worth people's money. They shouldn't be making any money. I would rather be looking at their art and being like, why is that even in here? This is ass. This is something that's not even worth half the amount that they're charging for it. And if I really took it to an extreme, I would then probably spend some time figuring out who they are and stewing and brewing on how much I dislike them or how much they don't deserve the financial gain that they've had from selling their art. You really, I think, start to see just in that one example how jealousy and envy are different. It's not necessarily to say that jealousy sparks motivation or sparks action, but it at least changes the perspective of it to say, well, I want that. So it's more likely to get a person to act on it and do something so that they then attain that thing. Envy is not going to work that way. Envy is going to make you resent or even hate the person who has the thing that you want, or in extreme situations, try to take it from them and get it for yourself. So this, again, is where the conversation at large gets a little bit muddled because, again, some people are confusing envy with jealousy. And really, something that I wanted to spend some time talking about is that I think the two potential emotions can come about in different ways depending on the context, depending on the actual situation. The creative jealousy that I've described throughout this episode that I've personally experienced, where I see people make something that I think I could make or make better, that's going to be creative jealousy. And it's very, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very unlikely that somebody is going to feel envious toward an artist that they don't know. You're not going to necessarily, unless you're kind of a crazy person, sorry to say, but to me it seems a little crazy that you would low-key like stalk this artist and be like, they didn't deserve it. It's hard to do that because you literally don't know them. So I think naturally envy is not going to be the emotion that's experienced there any further than they didn't deserve that. But again, like, you don't know that person, so it's really hard to say they specifically, that individual did not deserve the notoriety or the fame or the money that they've garnered from practicing their craft. I think another one that's similar is watching people, maybe even closer to you, people that you do know, having the life path that you want, or taking the direction that you want, taking the career that you wanted, or advancing in the way that you hoped that you would. That could be a lot of different things, but just in my brain, I'm thinking of your friend from college who you still keep in contact with or follow on Instagram, got engaged and married a year out of college. They now have 3 beautiful children and they live in a gorgeous house and just like their life looks perfect and it's what you wanted. I'll just say that as an example. Again, even though you know that person, it's a little bit hard to be necessarily envious of that unless you kind of look back on that person as not deserving of the life that they got. This is where I think Farah's conversation on TikTok, the original creator, started to come into play, because some of her discourse, some of her conversation could be interpreted as she didn't think her friend deserved all that they got because they were privileged, their family was wealthy, they were having everything handed to them. So maybe it's a judgment on their character, or maybe it's a judgment on how hard they had to work for the things that they got. But even though she never explicitly said this, I think a lot of people interpreted it as she didn't think that the friend deserved it. Maybe even more severely, she didn't think that her friend should have any of that, and she should have it because she's worked harder. Again, she never said that, but that is a way that the conversation could have been steered. Another personal example that maybe is even teetering a little bit more into the envy side of things is when I listen to podcasts that I think are lower in quality than mine, but I know that they get sponsorships or they get brand deals. Sometimes I'll be envious. Sometimes I'll be like, man, like my work is way higher quality than that. I edit this so much better than that person. I should be able to get brand deals. I should be able to get XYZ. But then I stop short, because even though I'm thinking of it as like, well, I'm doing a better job, I'm not necessarily thinking that so-and-so podcaster shouldn't have a podcast or that they don't deserve their podcast. It's like inching a little bit closer to that, if I'm being 1000% honest. But I don't think I've ever actively been like, well, they shouldn't even have a podcast because they don't even know how to edit. Like, that's just not even fair. I don't think that it's gotten to that point for me personally. But that would be where it's kind of edging between jealousy and envy. I hope this is all making sense. The place where I think envy, the worst of the two, gets a little bit more common is in relationships, particularly friendships or like romantic partnerships. And thankfully, this is not a part of my life, and it never really has been. I kind of have been perpetually in a relationship since I was 14. But I do think that it is very common to see your friends that are in happy relationships and really, really desiring that, to the point where you either, maybe even best case, distance yourself from that friend, or you resent that friend, or try to, maybe there's even cases, I know that this is like a trope in movies and TV, where you're jealous of the friend's partner and you try to get in between them so that the partner then gets with you. Like, I know that that's a thing, but that's where envy becomes true. That is where it's like, okay, you want what they have and you don't want that person to have it. So all to say, definitely different meanings here. Friendships and relationships are where envy, I think, happens more frequently, but it's definitely the more toxic of the two. It really all just comes down to whether you simply want the thing for yourself, or if you don't think that the person who has it is deserving of it and you wish that it would be either taken from them or that they never would have received it in the first place. That's envy. And in all honesty, the one thing that I want to say, just to kind of end the conversation about the distinction, because I'm still more interested in just talking about jealousy in general, here are my parting words with experiencing envy. I think it is something worth being very honest about within ourselves. If we experience envy, if we think anybody in our life is not deserving of something for any particular reason, I think it is worth asking why we think that. Why does this person not deserve their brand deal? Why does this person not deserve a happy relationship? Why does this person not deserve motherhood. Whatever the situation may be, I think it is worth reflecting on the thing that they have that we want and why we think they shouldn't have it. And to be also entirely honest, I don't really think that there's much more that can be done with envy other than maybe making amends if you realize that you've treated them poorly because of it and never disclosed that to them. But if you still care about this person and you realize in hindsight, like, oh, I was pretty mean about that, or like, oh, I really like haven't been giving them an honest relationship. Yeah, maybe that's something that you need to discuss or admit. And of course, it's all dependent on the situation. But if this is a person that you do genuinely care about and want to stay friends with or be in relationship with in some way, and that's been a hindrance on that friendship, just maybe talk to them about it. Be honest, be open. And if that's not possible or you're not ready to do that, at least owning it within yourself and recognizing that that's been a feeling that you've experienced that maybe you don't want to. See what we can do about that. This is also a great thing to take to a therapist if it really is something that bothers you enough or something that comes up enough that you're like, yeah, maybe I do need to like work through this a little bit more, because envy is tricky. And I mean, I don't know about y'all, but it's not an emotion that I like to wallow in or hang on to. So just a thought there. But to continue on in this conversation, one thing that I definitely do want to discuss a little further is what we can do with jealousy in general. Being the emotion that tells us, I want this thing. I've kind of alluded to it throughout this whole episode, but I think the obvious answer is just that if there is something that you want that somebody else has, believe in yourself enough to know that you could have it. You could achieve it. I want to make this part of the conversation distinctly and vehemently different from abundance mindset or manifesting mindset, because I really don't like to go down that rabbit hole. I don't really think that those are realistic ways of getting the things you want. But there are pieces of them that could potentially be helpful here. This is going to be very nuanced. The first thing I will say is this. I know, because I have lived through it most of my life, that it is not as simple as saying, believe in yourself, to believe in yourself. And I have worked up to a place over literally my whole life where I have been confident enough to be like, oh, that art in that shop, I could make that. I could maybe make that better. And I did. Like, that took 26 years to build up to. So if you are 30 years old right now thinking I could never do something like that, or I don't believe in myself enough to try to do something like that, or you're just even scared of potentially not following through or failing, I hear you. And there's a lot of other ways in life where I feel that way right now. I haven't worked my way up to that yet. So I really just want to ground us in that understanding that it's not just as simple as putting yourself in the mindset of confidence, because we have to build that confidence over time. There are a few things that we can do to start that process, and some of them do honestly suck, and it's almost like exposure therapy. I think of it in that way because I was going through exposure therapy for OCD for quite some time. And that's not fun. Like, it is objectively not fun to do, but getting comfortable with a few of the sort of like shittier pieces of having enough confidence to do things that you want to do or achieve the things you want to achieve. We build confidence through our bodies experiencing failure or rejection or whatever, and then coming out on the other side of it and realizing that we lived through it, like we survived. This is a very biological practice because your body's going to panic, your brain's going to panic, you're going to think like, I'm dying, or I'm not going to survive this. And then you do. And then your body starts to realize that it's safe. So just here's a thought, okay? I've been coming around to the idea of rejection therapy lately because I have quite literally experienced this and do regularly experience this in the work of building a podcast that I want to have guests on. I have had some incredible guests that I couldn't believe agreed to work with me just because this is not a very big project at this point in time, because I have nothing to offer. I can't pay them. I don't have a huge audience, but still having a few successes there has gotten me bold and confident enough to reach out to other people that, you know, it's a stretch, but maybe they'd say yes, and they don't. And rejection hurts. Like I hate getting the email that says, I don't have time to give to this right now, or I don't have the capacity for this, or thank you, but no. It sucks. Like it genuinely physically does hurt a little bit, but I'm still here. I'm still reaching out to people. I still love to do this work, and I survived it, and we're going to keep it moving, you know? So even the smallest rejection therapy can be helpful in a situation where you're trying to build your confidence in whatever lane you feel like you need to. Rejection therapy can be an example like what I just gave, or it can be as ridiculous as asking somebody on the street if they'd be willing to walk with you, like down the street to take you to the grocery store. Like most people are going to say no, but that's the whole point, is you get the no, your body over time realizes that it's safe to hear the word no, and then you're going to feel brave enough to ask for the bigger things. That's just one idea. Another one that could potentially work, and I think runs in the same vein as this, to build your confidence, to build your self-belief, is to really honestly finish small tasks deliberately and give yourself some, maybe not necessarily a reward, but some sort of memento or symbol or reminder to say, I did that. So a person that doesn't have a lot of belief in their self probably doesn't think that they can finish the things that they start, or hasn't experienced a lot of that or congratulated themselves when they do. So every completed tiny thing, even like a workout when you haven't worked out in a while, even a long walk with a friend when you haven't gotten outside in a while, those are things that you can look back on and be like, okay, like, great, I did that. I said I was going to do it, and I did. Great. That should be, over time, a way to build the belief in yourself to then go out and get the bigger things that you are envious of other people having. I think it's also really important when we are jealous of someone, when we are admitting that to ourselves and trying to either push that feeling down or find a way out of it or ignore it altogether, like feeling bad about feeling jealous, I think is potentially the wrong approach, because yes, it is maybe a shameful emotion to feel. And I don't even say that to say that it should be shameful, but yeah, it's not a feeling that anybody likes to have. It's not great. But if we're talking about believing in ourselves enough that we think we can achieve the thing that somebody else has that we don't currently have, it's also worth really sitting with the thing or the things that they have that we don't. And when I say this, I'm quite literally saying, take inventory of why you are jealous of a certain person, or why you are jealous of a certain thing that a person has. It really is almost like an exercise in figuring out if it really even does mean that much to you, or if you're just kind of like caught up in your feelings. But we want to make the gap between who we want to be and who we are right now as clear as we possibly can. And maybe, likely, somebody has something that we want because that thing would get us closer to being the ideal version of ourselves, the person that we want to be. So examine that. Examine first. I'm going to be very clear, maybe as clear as I can be here. Examine first the person that you want to be. When you visualize that person, what do they look like? What do they have going for them? What is their day-to-day like? What is your routine and your schedule like? What do you have? What does that person have that you don't currently have? And if that doesn't quite line up with the thing that you are supposedly jealous of, then we can drop that jealousy. That is an emotion to work around, get out of the way, realize it doesn't actually align with the ideal version of myself or my life. So jealousy points us in a direction that is very specific. We just oftentimes are so ashamed of feeling that way that we don't give ourselves enough time to think through it and to objectively identify what it is. It ends up being a vague, like, I want what they have, but the useful work is the specificity. What exactly do they have? What part of that thing do I actually want? What is the first, like, real difference between my life and their life that I could actually begin to address? If we just have some vague longing for something else or someone else's life, that feeling gets stuck and does maybe potentially turn into envy or resentment. But the specific things give us action steps. That tells us what we would need to then do. Then we follow that direction. And I also think whenever we are ready for this step of it, I think the next thing to potentially try doing is almost, this is where I'm saying it's a nuanced conversation. I'm not trying to be an abundance girly, a manifesting girly, but there are some pieces to this that can be helpful. And I would phrase it as you can almost give yourself an affirmation, or when you're in conversation with other people and they're asking like, oh, how's everything going? What are you doing right now? Like, what's new with you? An affirmation along the lines of saying, I'm working on building my podcast. I'm working on publishing my first book. I'm working on going out to more social events and meeting new people because I don't have a lot of friends here. Whatever the thing is that you're jealous of other people having, say to other people when they ask you, oh, I'm working on that. I'm working on this thing. You don't have to say that you're jealous of the people that have it, but just say, yeah, it's just something that I'm like working through, working on. It's a priority in my life right now to do this. I think practicing that goes along with the sort of fake it until you make it line that a lot of people like to use. I know that's a cliche, but it's kind of like that first step, right? If you say out loud, either to yourself or to other people, that you're working on something, you are actually more likely to work on that thing. You are more likely to give attention to it and to stick with it over time. Because now that you've shared it with somebody, you feel like a little bit of commitment to doing it. You feel a little bit more responsible to, oh, well, I told them I was working on this thing, so I guess I'm going to work on this thing. And I think the last thing, this is also a little bit of a cliche, but definitely just worth mentioning in this conversation, is acknowledging the highlight realness of seeing other people's lives in the day and age that we live in. This has been a long-standing point to the larger conversation around, like, don't base your life off of somebody else's highlight reel. That's the cliche. And that's very true. You know, I think it is just worth reminding ourselves, especially in this context, that, okay, sure, we can be jealous of people that we see online particularly. We can even be jealous of our friends who tell us, hey, I just got this deal. Hey, I just got a new car. Ooh, I'm moving into this great, amazing new house in like an amazing new city, whatever it is. But we don't necessarily know what it took to get there. We don't necessarily know what they are or aren't working with, what obstacles were in place for them. Even if it is a close friend, they might not be giving us the whole picture. So you almost have to kind of like reverse engineer the person that you've built up in your head and not necessarily deconstruct it, but realize I probably don't have the full story here. Even simple things like realizing how long it took them to achieve this thing, or what their financial situation was in trying to achieve this thing. That's all pieces to the puzzle that we probably don't have. And it changes the conversation in our own brains to say, rather than they have something I don't, it's more like they've done something that I haven't done. And that even takes me all the way back to another example that I gave earlier with, like these writers, dude, they suck. I could write better than that. Why are they published? Because like I could be published. Well, yeah, I could be if I ever tried, but I haven't. You know, I've never sent any of my writing to any journal places. Like even talking about it, you can probably tell, like, I don't even really know where I would start with that because I haven't tried. So it's not really fair for me to be jealous or even envious of other authors who have been published when I haven't really tried to get published. But there we have it. That's motivation for me to start. All in all, jealousy can absolutely be a complicated and annoying and frustrating and even like icky experience. So it fully makes sense that some people do want to like push it away or villainize people who struggle with it because, yeah, it is, like I've said earlier, kind of shameful. It is objectively negative to feel jealous. But that doesn't mean that it isn't useful. So I hope that this little conversation, especially here at the end where we've talked about self-belief, I do feel like that is something that we can actually do with our jealousy. And I also hope that this hasn't come off as just another productivity tip or optimizing tip, because I really don't think that it is that. I don't feel that way when I'm trying to work through these emotions myself. It isn't even really a matter of like getting rid of it altogether. But I think it is a way of working with it so that it doesn't just fester within us and then eventually breed resentment and envy, because we don't want to go there. That is objectively also the worst of the feelings, right? We don't want to hate people. We don't want to wish bad on other people. We do want to live the life that we think we ought to. And jealousy plays a really big part in that. So long as we don't hate ourselves for feeling that way, because we definitely shouldn't. That's not helping anybody. I just want to say, again, thank you so much for being here. And if you feel like this is something you want to continue the conversation around, please and always feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or through email. All of that is down below in the show notes. And also share it with a friend if you feel like this is a conversation that's been coming up for you lately or something that you've been talking about with people. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to know that other people are talking about it too. Yeah, thanks so much. And just before we go, we got to end with our usual game of We're Not Really Strangers. I do this every single episode. And I always pull from the healing expansion pack of the card game. So if you have a journal nearby, or if you want to pause for a second and grab it, whatever you want to do, if you want to just listen along, that's cool too. I always think that this is a good opportunity to just self-reflect on something tangible. And it may or may not have anything to do with the conversation we just had. But regardless, just a little food for thought. All right, here it is. What do you need to forgive yourself for today? Oh, gosh. What do I need to forgive myself for? I think I'm going to forgive myself for promising more than I can deliver, because I know that it comes from a place of ambition. It's the ambitious part of me that tells people, yeah, I'm going to have this graded by tomorrow, or yeah, I'm going to work on this thing and get it to you by this time. a lot of these, I just have to say, a lot of these reflection questions at the end, especially lately, have been revolving around work specifically for me. And by the way, if you don't know, this is not my job. I am a high school English teacher, so I really do kind of live a double life. And when I'm talking about overpromising things, it is almost always related to schoolwork or my own life. Like I'm overpromising myself things. But in this context, I really specifically am thinking about how I always tell kids when they ask me like, oh, when is that essay going to be graded? I always tell them like, oh, tonight. Oh, like definitely by the end of this week. Like I will give them a timeline that I would say I follow up on that timeline about 5% of the time. It's really not great. And I'm sure that they are all behind my back talking about how like, oh, she said it was going to be in by Friday and it wasn't. And it's a small thing. I hope that they don't actually hate me for it, but I have realized that it's not really doing them a good service, and it's not helping me in any way. It's only hurting me to say that I'll be done by this time when I never am, you know? So I think it's just like, it's giving me an unrealistic expectation to live up to that I'm never going to be able to meet. And it's the fact that I can't follow up on it and that I can't do what I say I'm going to do, probably almost certainly diminishes their trust in me. So it's just kind of like a lose-lose situation. And I don't like it. And I'm getting all in the weeds here, but I'm realizing that, you know, I am upset that I do this. I don't like that I do this, just as I don't like feeling jealous, right? This is a part of my disposition that I wish wasn't a thing, but I know that it comes from a good place. And I hope that my students and my colleagues also know that it comes from a good place and that I really genuinely am trying my best. It's just my promise isn't as good as I can often actually realistically deliver. So I'm going to forgive myself for jumping the gun a little bit on my due dates. I'm going to forgive myself for giving myself an unrealistic timeline. And definitely in the future, I'm thinking like next school year when I have a new set of students, I will be more honest in how long it takes me to get stuff done because, yeah, I just don't think it's really helping anybody. So that's me. But what about you? What do you need to forgive yourself for today? Maybe it's your own feelings of jealousy, whether you've wanted to admit them or not. But I don't know. Write about it. Share it with me. Share it with a friend. Whatever you need to do. And I love you so much. As always, thank you for supporting Led to Gold. It really, really means the world that you're here. And I will see you next week on the blog with a new little post and in 2 weeks back here on the podcast. So until then, take care of yourself and we'll talk soon. Bye.